What does the Colorado Cattleman's Agricultural Land Trust and the Harvard School of Divinity have in common? The answer is Owen Yager, my next guest, who weaves together a really diverse and intriguing background to find the commonalities that we all share. Stay with us. Welcome to The Avid Adventurer. I'm your host, Dave Secunda, founder of Avid for Adventure, and I am psyched you're here. Each week, just like today, I'll bring you an interview with a kiddo, young adult, or parent as they share not only the details of their noteworthy outdoor pursuits, but also how they navigate risk, challenge, setbacks, and service in their journey. It'll bring a smile to your face, and you'll feel your heart expand as you get to know the inner landscapes of these athletes. After listening, I know you'll feel uplifted and ready for your own next Avid adventure. So let's dive in. Owen Yager, I am so pleased to have this time with you. I'm excited to explore some of the topics that we talked about before the call. I feel like you are just a very unique interweaving of a lot of things that most people would think are hard to weave together. When I think about your past through a degree at Harvard Divinity School, and now to your position at Colorado Cattleman's Agricultural Land Trust, and the time you spent in the outdoors recreating and appreciating the natural resources. It's an interesting navigation to hear about, one that I think our listeners are going to be really excited to dig in with you on.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm psyched to be here.
All right. Well, Owen, I like to start with a couple of questions. Let's begin with this one, which is just to share what stands forward to you as far as the time you spent in the outdoors, something you're proud of or something that you really think about a lot that's meaningful to you about the outdoors.
I think a couple of things came up when you first brought up that you would ask me this question. I don't know if that's too far behind the scenes, but I promise this isn't all scripted if anybody's listening. But I have a really good dog, and I got him when I was living in Boston a couple of years ago. I saw on Facebook this dog in Lander, Wyoming. And for a couple of reasons, I looked at this picture of this dog and I thought, you're mine. And I called the shelter and I said, it's October. I can be out there in December. Can you hold on this dog for me? And they said, are you crazy? No, we're not going to hold the dog in a shelter for 2 days or 2 months. And then on December 3rd, they called me back and said, do you still want to come out in 2 weeks? He's still here. And so I drove 31 hours for this dog I'd never met. And he's awesome. He was instantly awesome. The morning after I got him, I spent the night up in Lander and then drove down to my folks' house in the Front Range of Colorado. And he got woken up at 5 a.m. by something and was whining at the door to go out. And we got in the car and we're driving before sunrise. And as we were driving through southwestern Wyoming, the sun dog was up in the sky. It's just a rainbow in the middle of a cloud. And he, I think, encapsulates that kind of space where that's where he's from. And that's what I think he brings out in me. And I get to adventure with him. And having him as sort of this constant companion of, sort of like mountain joy and experience has just been really, really wonderful. I'm really proud of the relationship that I have with him. And I'm really proud of him as a being that I get to share space with. He did get skunked the other day, so I was less proud of that. But generally, he's really good.
Well, that, as I know from my experience, is a definite companion task to work through. So well done that he's still your favorite being there. And I'll ask you more about him because you led in with him when we were talking before, just saying that it's your favorite recreation buddy out there. So we'll come back to that. But how about this other question? If I really knew you, I would know that. How would you complete that?
I'm kind of an introvert. I talk a lot. I talk so much. I don't ever shut up. But I think at the end of the day, I need to go home and recharge and do things alone. That's oftentimes taking time outdoors. That's most days it's just walking down. I live up on a dirt road, 2 miles on a dirt road. And it's just walking down that dirt road with the dog, Ernest. But I need to have that time away from things, which I think it allows me to talk a lot when I'm not away from things, but I need to have that as sort of, that closet introvert time.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, I'd love to hear about this journey that you've taken that really kind of led through theological studies at Harvard to the Colorado Cattleman's Land Trust, Agricultural Land Trust. That in particular, when I heard of that path, I was at first like, help me connect the dots. And so do so. Like, let us know what led you to Harvard. And then from there, what led you here? And how do they help us make sense of them all in one package?
Sure. I think my degree, that path got started my sophomore year of my undergrad. I was halfway towards the English major, my sophomore year at Carleton College in Minnesota. You didn't have to declare, I think, as is the case at a lot of schools, until your sophomore year what you wanted to study. And on a whim, I took an introduction to Islam class in the winter of, I guess it was winter of 2017, 2018. And I really quickly realized that it was fun. The English studies that I had wanted to do were interesting because of the way that it let me think about other people's worldviews as informing theirs. And when you're thinking about what speaks to you about Moby Dick or The Old Man and the Sea, Catcher in the Rye, any of those great novels that you read in an English class, you're thinking about the storytelling, and you're thinking about what fuels you in that story. And religion is that to an extreme. It's the stories that actually make people do things, that make you go and spend 3 hours of your morning every Sunday reflecting and meditating, that make you say a grace before you have a meal. Whatever it might be, people take those stories, those traditions, and build lives around them in really powerful, really beautiful ways. And I wasn't, the introduction to Islam, I'm not Muslim, I'm not particularly religious in any way. But I wanted to be able to understand what people were thinking about when they built their lives around things. Pretty quickly after I declared my major off of that class, I realized that the academic study of religion is whatever you want it to be. It's super flexible. You can have it be fully a seminary experience. You can have it be a social studies experience or an anthropology experience or a quasi-English experience where you're writing stories. And so just to even go farther back, I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which is how I got to know Dave Secunda. But I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which is a really sort of recreational space. On the weekends, my dad would take me up I-70 to go and ski or to hike in the summer up in the Holy Cross, the Moonbells Wilderness. We would bounce in and out of the mountains all the time. But they were always sort of a space that you went to and then came back from. It wasn't a space that you lived in unless you were really an extreme recreationalist, or that you had a sort of relationship, at least not in my worldview, that you had a relationship of real stewardship with. And that got textured, as I think we'll probably talk about in the next little while. That got textured as I went through my teens and got to know particularly agriculture, in a couple of ways. But the core of sort of my lived experience was still that recreational lens. And so in my undergrad, I wrote a thesis on El Capitan, so the rock wall in Yosemite that I am imagining most of the listeners to this podcast probably know about.
Yep, I've climbed it about 7 times myself. So yeah.
So I wrote this thesis on El Cap and on these 2 movies, well, 3 movies, Valley Uprising to a lesser degree, and then particularly Dawn Wall and Free Solo, which are Alex Honnold and Tommy Caldwell. And thinking about them as coming out of this American natural tradition, starting with Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, and then moving forward to John Muir and Ansel Adams as kind of public prophetic figures of American nature. And then moving through to these modern people who are engaging with the same senses of sublime as those other previous thinkers were thinking about, and then putting that out into American conscious. That was a fun project. It's a really fun project. And it let me think a lot about how within that one specific kind of bolder worldview, nature was sacred. It was sacred to me. That's where I've always gone out and found the divine, however you want to quantify it. So it was about that kind of that recreational space in this thesis. I graduated in the spring of 2020, which, as you may remember, had a little bit of a pandemic going on. And trying to figure out what came next, I ended up in rural Nevada, in a small town called Yarrington, which has 30,000 people, an onion farm, a really big onion farm, and a river running through it, the Walker River. And this Walker River has a conservancy associated with it that's trying to increase the river's flow and effectively raise the water level of the terminal desert lake that this river flows into. Anyway, while they were navigating sort of water law and these water leases, they were using that water on formerly agricultural land that had been abandoned, and using AmeriCorps technicians like myself to rehabilitate that land with native species, so that it wasn't just the dying bits of alfalfa and a bunch of Russian thistle tumbleweed. I was in that field and I was having a really good time. And I was also thinking to myself that nobody cared what I wrote my thesis about. People don't care about what I think as somebody who's coming from this one very specific context. People care about what they think and what they believe and what fuels them. And I had sort of this deep-seated sense that I wasn't good enough at hearing their stories yet. And that's what brought me, this is a long-winded answer, but that's what brought me to HDS, Harvard Divinity School, and was this sense that I needed to practice at hearing other people better, and how they engage with the same landscapes that I loved on their terms. And I was doing that with a particular interest in, I think, the rural Americans that I think I've seen oftentimes getting kind of ignored, I think, for lack of a better word, in
sidelined.
Sidelined, just maybe a more polite word.
Yeah. Let me ask you, and I want to then connect that dot from there to where you are, and then how you kind of coexist in both of these, or all of these worlds together, and kind of what the advantage of that is. But I'm coming back to this thesis that you wrote around Free Solo and Dawn Wall, and thinking about, for the first time, this thought of Tommy Caldwell or Alex Honnold being the figures of history in today's modern society that some of these historic conservationists and authors were thought of years and years ago. Do you think that's the case? I mean, is this the modern similar sort of figure to these that many of us read in college as kind of the foundational conservationists out here?
I don't know. I don't think I would be surprised.
Yeah.
I think that particularly those two guys. I mean, there are, the Dean Potters and
Mm-hmm.
everybody else that sort of built that Valley's climbing scene.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that
I mean,
those two in particular, I mean, Kevin Bjorkson is also in Donwell, but I don't think that he's quite as much as Tommy Caldwell is somebody who really translated the sublimity of that space and the sublimity
mm-hmm.
of that rock wall and the sublimity of the experience you have with it
Mm-hmm.
into public consciousness and public media.
So in that way, I do see the similarities of someone taking this personal experience of their sublime unfolding in a wilderness, and being able to kind of translate that to a broader audience to bring people in. I think it's also interesting to think about the incredible difference in the context of kind of these historical figures versus, let's call it, these new historical figures. When you read some of these original texts, it's talking about kind of these deep learnings and spiritual and personal growth experiences in the wilderness through moving through a very intimate relationship with nature, and translating that, I think, into writing is as one of the superpowers. And with these two, Tommy and Alex, I look at them as also like taking this current vocabulary of society, which is a lot about adventure and adrenaline, and bridging that gap to the sublime. I think in both of those, there was this deep personal expression of their connection to a deeper self and nature and spirit in some ways. And so it is kind of, I mean, I've never really thought about it that way. And hopefully if Alex or Tommy are listening, you'll kind of be thinking about that role in history going forward. But that's an interesting parallel to look at.
And I think that part of also what makes them both such effective spokespeople for that, that aspect of Yosemite and of American nature and of rock climbing is that they don't present themselves as adrenaline junkies.
Right.
They present themselves as sort of as measured people who are out to have this unknowable experience, but it's not about just like, I'm going to do something because it scares me.
I think it's also beautiful to see their journey of learning and growth very publicly, unlike historic figures. Like, I feel like we as society are along for their ride, which I can see the development and learning and growth and maturity that's so gracefully shared.
That's interesting, I think. I like that. I mean, when you think about something like Thoreau's writing, where he's talking about, I don't know if you've read it's Night in a Jailhouse Cell. It's an essay. He got arrested for civil disobedience, spent a night in the Concord jail.
Who is this?
This is Henry David Thoreau.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when he's telling you that, and it's about the same kind of learning, and these are why I did these things, but it's all reflective and it's all sort of self-narrated. Whereas I think, as much as the editing process of a film like Free Solo or Donwell very much does create a narrative around it, and it's external, which I think also changes things around a little bit. It's Jimmy Shannon making edits to Alice Honnold's story. I think that you also you get to see it happening in live time, or at least you get the sense that that's happening in live time.
Yeah.
You don't see the editing, you don't see what's ending up on the cutting room floor, so you get the feeling of watching this growth journey happening.
Well, and I think the growth journey I'm talking about is not only in the movie itself, but with the currency of social media, like the access to thinking of how many people now follow these two and watch their continued evolution after the making of that movie going forward. It is pretty amazing. All right, Owen, so I want to kind of, connect the dots here a little bit to, your current work with the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust.
Yeah, CCLT
and
for sure.
CCLT. Okay, I'll go with that. I'm gonna share like a personal experience that this reminded me of, which was I too kind of entered the world of conservation through a recreation door, I will say. And in the 90s, or it might even be the late 80s, but I think it was the 90s, I served on the Colorado uh, BLM Resource Advisory Council. And so this was kind of this kind of interesting conglomerate of folks who were staffers at the BLM, political leaders, community members, ranchers, recreationalists, all to advise the BLM on land policy. And for me, it was the first time to put all of these constituents in a room, because like a little snow globe, and shake it up to see what happened, and to really develop a deep listening for the caring of each of these different constituents through their lens of perception, through their lens of interaction with the natural resource, all with the interests at heart, which were, in their mind, kind of conserving or preserving that resource for their, their future and perceived highest good for those resources. And then coming together to kind of craft a common ground was exceedingly difficult. I mean, it was unbelievably challenging. And I felt, for me in my professional career, is one of the earliest and greatest challenges to find common ground. And this was just in Colorado on what I would call, table stakes land policy, in general. So, in some ways, you've kind of landed yourself, I'm sure, in this place of paths crossing between recreation, conservation, land use, all of these sorts of things. So talk a little bit about that deliberate choice and kind of how that is expressed in your current work, how you bring all those different parts of who you are with authenticity into something that, could be challenging like that.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of things to that. One is, in my late teens, I spent a lot of time working around ag. I first got into that background from a recreational relationship courses. I was just riding Western kind of for fun. Super lucky to have been able to do that. But through that, I then got positioned to work with cattle. I was useful enough with a rope and a cutting horse to help. And that was, I think, super, super good. So part of where I'm coming from, I think, is from a deep love of that space, and of sort of engagement with land, and engagement with land and animals, and engagement with working land, as a space of real, I think, personal fulfillment. I love the people that I've gotten to know in those spaces, as just like good, fun, honest, hardworking people that have been incredible partners. I joined in this work. I love these people that I've gotten to know as just like mentors and friends, and as good people that I think I've wanted to work with and work for. I think too, throughout those teenage years, as I was getting to know these people and landscapes and this way of life, that is more, it's more rural way of life, whether it's working in ag or with land in this way or not, whether it's just the existence of being in a town of 3,000 people instead of a town of 30,000 people, 300,000 people. I saw over and over what we said before, this sense of those folks being sidelined from conversations that they could be engaged really powerfully in. I think that's particularly true around conservation. where it seemed that I was often seeing this discourse happening where conservation was just something that happened, and conservation was something that happened if you were a land steward in a very specific way. And that's not to say that that's not a way that conservation does happen. I think excellent conservation comes out of recreation and public access spaces. I mean, BLM and Forest Service are great conservation organizations. But that all of these people who had power over their landscapes and deep engagement with their landscapes and deep love for their landscapes, all of these people, I think, weren't getting powerfully engaged in conversations that I was seeing. And I really, really wanted to help with that, and to help those folks get heard, to help those folks get engaged as equal footing partners, not as people to be told what to do, but to really empower them in their landscapes. And so, yeah, I wanted to figure out ways of engaging those rural land stewards, private landowners, guides, recreationalists in that hunting and fishing sense. It's pretty different than
have you been able to do that? Have you been able to get that engagement? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think there have been a couple of reasons for that. The organization that I'm working with is a really good organization. I'm super proud to be a part of them. We were founded in the late 90s by the Colorado Cattlemen's Association to hold conservation easements, so restrictions on land effectively, for the agricultural community at a time that conservation and agriculture were seen as diametrically opposed, not as friends. And because of that and the way that relationship was built with the CCA's support and with kind of this institutional reputation and cultural reputation for being a real resource for rural Colorado, we've gotten to be heard and to be seen as an ally. So being associated with CCALT, I think I walked in, people welcomed me with open arms.
And are you so kind of walking in and engaging that community, which it sounds like you've done effectively, and there's kind of a welcoming environment there. Have you been able to then create more conversations and kind of collaborative success with those that you had kind of historically seen marginalizing rural participants and those that you're working with now?
I don't know if I individually have, but I think that I've been a part of conversations that have definitely done that. I think so. I'm in Steamboat Springs. I mentioned that earlier,
which is a great physical example of that combination of those two things. I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this county, Route County, and sort of Northwest Colorado as a broader whole, I think have done a really good job of trying to bring those folks together on conversations. Yesterday, I was in a Route County Recreation Roundtable meeting, which has seats on it for land trusts, for the land managers, that's Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Forest Service and the county. It has representatives from the AFLI Sustainability Council, the AFLI Community Foundation, from Friends of the Yampa, which is primarily affiliated with boating, from Route County Riders, some mountain bikers, and a rancher. And so all of those folks are, I think, put in conversation in a really cool way in this community. I think that's happening, the general trend, I think, so that's happening more in the state. I think that's true. I hope that's true. And that is an ongoing conversation. But this community in particular has been really, really fun to get to see that as sort of a shared stakeholder space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in that shared agenda, undoubtedly more can get done as you're bringing kind of diverse constituencies together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that this roundtable is super focused on right now is wildlife corridors, wildlife habitat corridors, migration corridors. there are big summer habitat swaths up in, well, all around. I mean, topography shifts, and elk move from Maybell out in the far northwest corner of Colorado, up past Craig, up, and they move back and forth to Steamboat into the Zirkle Wilderness and California Park. Those elk, they don't care about if it's private land or public land. They care that they can move there. And so there's a kind of this huge conversation that has stakeholders that are private landowners and public land managers, all coming together around it of sort of supporting these migration corridors, and working together on what sort of shared solutions can be there. And I think I bring that up partially as an example because I think it showcases that I really do think that there is this shared sense of want for what land management and sort of the concurrent cultural management of the American West should look like. Like, everybody who's a stakeholder wants to have healthy wildlife. Everybody who's a stakeholder wants to have a healthy watershed. People have disagreements on what that looks like. And there are always going to be trade-offs. You can't mountain bike necessarily in elk winter habitat. Or I guess that's not seasonally appropriate. At least you're not backcountry skiing in elk winter habitat. But I think it's this ongoing conversation I'm finding to be more and more framed around how do we find common ground and how do we get good done, rather than you're just on the other side, I don't really want to talk to you. So I've had a lot of fun with that, and I'm super encouraged by that, frankly.
It's beautiful. Well, tell me about something that has been particularly, like, have you had a moment in, or just think about in general, it could have been in work, but it could have been in the outdoors, just a moment of inspiration over this last year. It's some moment where you either saw the deep humanity in someone or had a divine experience of nature in the outdoors, or like when you think back over the last year, like what really comes forward as that expression or that moment of that?
I had just a fantastic day in probably September or October of last fall, driving around the far northwest corner of Moffat County with a rancher, and he had invited me out, and he and we got to know each other over 5 hours. We had lunch together, had lunch with his family, with his parents, and I got to know him and his landscape and his concerns for his landscape, his concerns for what change might bring, but just him as a person deeply situated in this space that was just the most amazing landscape. And getting shown around by him, we'd be driving down this dirt road, and I've never been there. It all just looks beautiful to me. I'm sort of sitting there, I'm like, oh, cool, that's another amazing hill. And he's pointing out, that over there is like where the old cabin used to be, or that over there is where the best elk sighting is. And it's just this super cool way of getting to know kind of, landscape through this one guide. It was amazing. It was it was a wonderful way to get to know this man and the landscape that he was in, and all of it. It was great. Yeah.
Well, when you describe that, I know listeners can't see you, but I can see what looks like you re-experiencing that connection with that individual, just like seeing that percolating upliftment from the human connection and the intermingling of your humanity, as well as kind of the beautiful wrapper of the content of the landscape and learning as well. And yes, I think it's, gosh, what a beautiful alchemy to bring together that deep personal connection with the learning of the land, and knowledge that is like historic based on just such a long participation in that environment. Well, Owen, that feels like a good place to pause. I feel like that has been kind of an arc that helps me and our listeners connect the dots all the way from an undergraduate thesis on Alex Honnold and Tommy Caldwell and kind of their evolving role as let's call them environmentalists and conservationists of today, all the way through your time at Harvard and into the work that you're doing, bringing diverse constituents together for common good. So I really appreciate you, and thanks for taking some time with us to share your story.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed hearing from this avid adventurer as much as I did. Join me every week as we continue to explore the inner landscapes and outer accomplishments of our guests. And if you know someone who you think would make a great interview, please reach out to me at the email in the show notes. I look forward to reconnecting next week.